for this. All right, welcome to Story Night. Thank you for your patience. As I mentioned, we've got a new audio and old video. The live stream is probably going to serve as our recording for BCAT, assuming this works, assuming the batteries stay powered, assuming the phone stays powered. Since we have a short list tonight, this will probably work out just great. So, I can see, filled out these. I was a little concerned that this might get a little heavy, this question. If you feel like being funny, let's read these first few and see if it's needed. So the question tonight was, over the course of your life, what news event stands out the most and why? When the Twin Towers fell, I was scheduled to fly to Maryland on 9/14 to be there for the birth of my granddaughter. I was very fortunate that the planes were flying again by Friday. My granddaughter was born on Monday. I will always have a reminder on the news of how old she is. She's 21, or gonna be 21. Wow. Thanks for that. I have a feeling 9/11 is going to come up a lot. I think in my life that had the biggest impact of anything. Now, I was 1.5 for John F. Kennedy's assassination. I don't think it's an actual memory, but we were rebuilding on our house and something happened there that I have this foggy memory of. And it was happening at that time, but I can't count that. So first memory of a news event was probably, that I can remember, was Robert F. Kennedy's assassination. Over the course of your life, what news stands out the most and why? The assassination of John F. Kennedy. Why? When I was in high school, JFK seemed to be the only president that ever gave me a feeling of hope for the future. Yeah, see, this could get heavy tonight. I'll try to think of some funny news. I covered bees once. They descended on a car dealership over there at Peninsula Subaru. There was a little bush and they were hanging out there. Made the paper. Great video, too. Yes, see, that was necessary. Because over the course of your life, what news stands out most and why? I remember seeing the photos of children in Vietnam in Life magazine. The mental images have never left me, and the concept of war makes me so sad. My youngest son asked me about Vietnam the other day, and he said, was it weird to have it televised? And my answer was, it was all we knew. And I remember as a kid thinking we were winning because they would always show the body counts. And, that's how you win a war when you're 6 years old. All right, another JFK assassination. My mom was 6 months pregnant with me, and she was shopping with her sister at the JCPenney's in downtown Seattle. JFK's death was announced over the speakers in the store. My mom fainted and landed on me in the middle of the maternity section. If you know me, it explains a lot. Love it. Okay. So how this works, anybody here for the first time? Y'all look, welcome. How it works, we give people a theme. They tell a story based on that theme. Usually it's 5 minutes. I'm not going to be holding up time cards tonight. No props, no notes, no singing. We are going to make an exception tonight. We're going to have a poem, and when that name is drawn, you'll see how that works. So I'm going to draw the first name. Oh, and while I'm drawing a name, July 7th, I believe, is the next story night. If you want to, I sent out a newsletter. The very first newsletter I sent out had the theme for July, and it worked out so well last time that I forgot the theme, and somebody in the audience figured it out. So if you're here and are willing to go look for it, you can tell me what the theme is. If not, I'll look it up during the story. Memories? Yeah. No, July 7th. Oh, excuse me. July 7th. It's got to be caught on the video. Yes. Travels? Travels, everyone. Travels. Applause for Lindsay from the Cloverleaf. You can all put your phones down now. Okay. Our first storyteller tonight is Alicia Morales. By the way, I reached out to a few people, and maybe I'll save this for later. I'm going to read one more, and then we'll call you up, all right? Is your story funny? Or... Yes. Okay, good.
I think it is. Happy George.
Okay. Over the course of your life, what news event stands out the most and why? Chernobyl. Got my 20-year-old head into the greater world. Yeah, absolutely. All right, and with that, please welcome, with a light story, Alicia Morales.
Hello, everyone. Hello. So, I had to rack my brain really, really hard to find a story that kind of fit the theme for this evening. I'm very famous in very small, specific circles, but I said to myself, okay, headlines and deadlines, headlines and deadlines. And I started listening to a new podcast, and it's all about scary stories. And my friend and I were talking about scary stories, and I asked her, did I ever tell you about the time that I played with a Ouija board for science? And so she was like, no. And I was like, this would make the greatest deadline story, because what is a Ouija board, right? All right, so I don't know if anyone here is very well-versed in like haunted spots around the U.S., but if you are, you might have heard about the Lemp Mansion in Missouri. That's supposedly very, very haunted. Well, I used to live in Tulsa, and so St. Louis, Missouri was not that far. I decided to do a ghost hunt. I've always heard all these stories, and I wanted to see if it was true. Okay, so very, very haunted place. I had my little recorder, and all the lights were out, and I saw nothing. I asked real nice, and then I was like, oh, I bet you're not real, and nothing. So 2 hours of running around in the dark, I decided I'm going to try something different. And so there were these very well-versed, spiritualists up in the attic of this mansion, and they had a talking board out. Now, as most of you or some of you may know, growing up in the church, I was told, you never play with those types of things, ever, ever, ever. So I was like, well, when in Missouri. So I went up there, and so my scientist mind is like, okay, I'm not going to give into like the hype. I'm going to approach this very, very thoughtfully. So I said, I've never played with one of these things before. Can someone show me how it works? And this lady was like, you don't play with these types of things? And it's like, okay, all right, I'm noted. I'm new here, sorry. So if you've ever played a Ouija board, or if you haven't, you are supposed to put your hands on this little piece called the planchette. And that planchette is supposed to be kind of the thing that the spirits communicate between. So I said to myself, I think somebody moves it. That's just how it works. You play into it. In my mind, I said, okay, so if I if I hold it very lightly and it dips very quickly, that person's applying too much pressure, and they're the ones that are moving it. So I set up my experiment. And so, so we are communing with the great beyond. Okay, so we put our hands there, and I let up just a bit, and it dipped so quick. And I was like, okay. So we did it again, and I just let up ever so slightly, and it dips again. I'm like, gosh, I gotcha. So, and then I got properly scolded about how it was my fault that the board wasn't working because I was breaking the connection. All right, so we decide to give it a serious try, and I have my hand on it, and the lady's like, are there any spirits among us? And nothing happened. It was just bunk the whole time. So I said, you know what, this lady was pretty rude to me. I'm going to have a little fun. And so So if somebody's pushing it, it's going to be me. So we're circling around. Oh, the spirit's here, ready to commune. And here I go, yes. And she's like, oh, we've got one. And not wanting to show that it was me, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't think this was going to work. And she's like, it's okay. It's okay. I've got you. And I was like, wonderful. So, so she says, is this so-and-so from this house? And I was like, I don't want to be that one today. So I went, no. I was like, okay. Are you the wife of so-and-so? No. Are you the brother of so-and-so? No. And I thought, where am I going to take this? I don't quite know. And so she said, are you a spirit of the house? And so I was like, this is my turn. No. And again, not wanting to give it away that it was me, I was like, I don't know what this means, guys. What happened? And it is okay. We just have to keep in the circle. It's like, all right, where am I going to take this? So she says, are you a spirit of light? And I was just like, nope. And so again, it's just just like freaking out, like we've conjured a demon. They always said that this was going to happen to me, and I don't want to get possessed. So just playing it up. And so she's like, "It's okay. We'll just close the board and say, we're sorry to disturb you from your slumber and goodbye." Oh. I'm so glad that you were here to take care. I was so freaked out, and she was like, that's what I'm here for. And so I'm recounting this story to my friend, and I thought about it for a second, and it's like, that the other half of this story is I was at a very spiritual place, and I had this new person, and we connected to a spirit, not of this. She was very scared, but I led her through to the other side and kept her safe. I always wonder about that, like the other side of the story. What exactly was happening on the other end of that deadline? Thank you.
Alicia Morales, everyone. Round of applause. So what I was going to start telling you before, and I'm glad I waited because I remembered an important detail. So last Friday, there was a retirement party for somebody at work. There was cake. I didn't know this person, but they said there was cake and it needed to be eaten. I wasn't going to go. I knew there was cake. There's always cake at a retirement party. But then they were like urging us to go, and I'm like, well, I'm going to be a giver. I'm going to go get me some cake. So I went in, and there was a crowd gathered, and I said, who's Vicky? And they pointed to her, and I waved and said, thank you for retiring so I could have cake. It was a big laugh. It was lots of fun. And then Tuesday I got back to work and I got a phone call from Human Resources. I wasn't in trouble. Somebody tested positive at that party for COVID. So it got me thinking. So you're supposed to wait the 5 days. I waited till last night to test and I was fine. I'm negative. I'm negative in a good way. And but it got me thinking that, we should have backups because y'all would like to come to story night whether I'm here or not, right? Yeah. So I reached out to a few people and asked for, just in case, and honestly, this is something we'd kind of like to, I think it would be kind of good to do anyway, make it more of a community event, have other hosts from time to time. I reached out to a few people. Alicia was one of them. Alicia was ready to go. She'd be a great host. And so at some point, you may see Alicia up here. In fact, you probably will. Doug's another one. And I forget who else. If you're interested, just email me. Just leave a note somewhere. Oh, I didn't bring that note about emails. Emailing so you can get the newsletter. If you're here with somebody, when they get the news, anyway, figure out how to get the newsletter from me. Okay. So I think because we only have 5 storytellers tonight, I'll just go ahead and do this tonight and not put anybody on the spot. Okay. Over the course of your life, what news event stands out for out the most and why? Kent State. You guys are coming up with a good variety. I love that. 4 dead in Ohio. I know it says no singing, but kind of demands it. Announcement on the radio. Oh, this is another one. This is a second one. Elvis died. How many of you remember where you were when you heard Elvis died? I was on vacation in Denver with my family, and my grandpa was sitting on the front porch of this house. And we walked out, and he said, and it was a newspaper he got this from. So the news had escaped us that Elvis had died. Okay. 76, I think. 77. Way to go. It's your fault. Elvis was so heartbroken that you got married. Okay. Yeah, I got to think that of all the news items, I'm going to default to September 11th as well. If it doesn't get brought up, I'm going to bring up another one, I think, if I remember. By the way, our next storyteller will be Alicia Morales. September 11th, I'll never forget the feeling I had when I first heard an airplane flew over after the airspace was open. I thought for sure PSNS was going to be hit. Now I notice every plane flying overhead. I was living out in Vancouver. We were living in Camas, actually, and I had to drive to Vancouver for work, and it goes right along the Columbia River, and the airplane path is right along there. And I just remember driving down that road and seeing nothing in the skies for a while, except for from the National Guard base. They would fly out every once in a while. And then when I saw the first airplane for the first time, it was, I don't want to say it was great, but it wasn't even comforting. I was just glad. Okay. I began reading the local newspaper when the Tate LaBianca murders happened. The paper, delivered 2 days a week, was called the Daily News and Green Sheet. One double-sided, double page was actually green. It's now called the Daily News. This is in Los Angeles, right? Okay. No green, and it is published daily. I couldn't believe the photos they published from the murder itself. Really gruesome and probably affected the trials. Yeah. I remember getting freaked. I lived down in LA. I remember getting freaked out later when there was more conversation about, it was probably during the trials. Being afraid to go to bed at night. Those people's. Yeah. Yeah, and I think it was 68 because I think it was wasn't that the Summer of Love? Yeah. 69? So was the Summer of Love? I don't know. Hey. What? No. That was your own parents' Summer of Love. Okay. So that would be okay. Anyway, all right. So, you're not that much younger than I am. Okay. Let's see. I'll just leave it at that. With that, welcome Alicia Morales.
Well, this is the story of why I don't have a landline anymore. As some of you know, I've written a lot of op-eds for The Sun, a lot of letters to the editor. I think I wrote my first letter to the editor of the local paper when I was in high school in Muncie, Indiana. I think it was about the treatment of immigrants. This is not a new issue. I've written columns on gender-neutral pronouns. I've written columns on why white people should read black novels, not just anti-racist nonfiction, but novels to see what black people's daily experience is to them, what they write for each other. I've written columns about immigration, about all kinds of racism, and one of my earliest long columns for the Sun was about marriage equality. I dredged up a lot of great stories from my college Anthropology 101 class about all the forms that marriage could take in different societies. There was one society where anyone, including a married woman, could buy a wife. They bought wife with cattle. This was an African tribe. A wealthy woman could buy a wife to basically help her with household duties. People would buy a wife for their deceased son so that her children, whoever she had them with, would carry on the family name. It was a very interesting structure. I mean, a lot of young men didn't have the money to buy the cattle to buy a wife, but it was structured so that everybody could have a mate. All the babies were legitimate. It worked. There was another tribe where they were concerned about interbreeding. So 12 young men from one village and 12 young women from another village that was really remote would start a new community together. And they were all married to each other. So, marriage takes a lot of different forms. And I wrote about this. I wrote about how the construct of two people marrying for love rather than family, finances, or politics was a pretty modern thing. It was not the only possible form of marriage. So why should people complain about any two people that loved each other getting married? Well, there was a lot of blowback on this. Someone got my phone number, this was the old days of phone books, and shared it, I think, with their church. And it became a mission of that church to convince me of the error of my ways and the wrongness of my thinking by leaving me 30-minute long messages. I recognized some of the voices as repeat callers, but there were probably a total of 25 or 30 different people dedicated to this mission of convincing me that my opinion was wrong. Some of them were kindly and told me that, God loved me and they prayed every day that I would see how wrong I was. Some of them were filled with fury and told me that God would punish me for the error of my thinking. But they all averaged about half an hour, and there were 25 or 30 of them. And this went on for about 3 weeks after my column appeared. And at that point, I decided we really didn't need a landline anymore. And so that was it. Now, I haven't had time to write any columns lately, although I do have one in mind. Asking people who call themselves pro-life what their stand is on the guns that are meant for war and are used to kill schools full of children. But I'll save that for when I have more time. And I have learned never, ever to read the online comments on my columns. And that's about it. That's my headlines and lines.
of applause for Allison. I haven't pulled the name. Oh, okay. No, wait, don't go anywhere. It might be you. All right. Have a seat, Doug. I don't know, maybe that's a better thing. All right, our next storyteller is Barb Peterson. Round of applause, please. I have this vague memory when comments first started on news stories, and people would call us when I was working at the newspaper, and they might be a little upset, and they told me they read the comments, and I would kind of groan. Like, don't do that. Yeah, I had that experience one time, not 3 weeks, half hour each. When I was in college at BYU, I wrote something that offended somebody, and I got one phone call. It was short and sweet. And I was like, yeah, maybe my name doesn't need to be in the directory or whatever. But I didn't change it or anything because I think we had like 30,000 students, and Stephen Gardner isn't that uncommon a name. So I feel sorry for the other Stephen Gardner for whatever calls he got. Over the course of your life, what news event stands out the most and why? The first thing that comes to mind is the Kennedy assassination. I was 5 years old, and it was my 5th birthday party. Oh, man. It started out, well, no, never mind. I was going to say. Kamala Harris's inauguration as our first female vice president of color. Representation really does matter, y'all. She looks just like my aunties. It's the closest I felt to feeling truly represented by our government. Ain't perfect, but it's progress. The assassination of JFK. Still, I was in high school, and the whole school was crowded around 2 tiny TVs in shock. We were so young, and we didn't expect history to happen in our time. No kidding. When Jimmy Carter lost the election to Reagan, I was in elementary school. We were learning to vote. The whole class cried. So I grew up in Reagan country, and yeah, people weren't crying then. That was my first election. Trying to think my memory of it. What I remember is the network's dang reporters. They called it for Reagan before the polls had closed on the West Coast. They never did that again. They were. Well, some people. Well, not officially. So they get on there now and they say, well, this is what has to happen. And so you've got 4 hours. If you're into watching that for 4 hours, and I used to be, got out of that habit. All right, please welcome Barb Peterson.
Babies do not respect deadlines. Their due dates are always moving targets. So I had 3 babies. Let me tell you a little bit about each one. My first one was because of a wild weekend in Whitehorse. 3 months after I left home when I was 18. So he's fine. That's for another story. Yeah. So my due date for that one was just before Thanksgiving. I was very single, but I had a boyfriend who was not the father. I was living in Juneau. He was living in Sitka. It was a holiday weekend because it was Alaska Day. I was going to go visit him. And right in the middle of, while I was visiting him at the college, I felt these little twinges a month before I was due. And 27 hours later, I finally convinced the doctor that Lamaze works. He didn't know a thing about it, and I showed him how it worked, and was in labor all night and had him the next day, and everything was fine. So that one worked out. The boyfriend that I had, I finally married him. We eventually had a child. I was working up on Queen Anne Hill, lived right near South Center, and I was due April 9th. This was about the 23rd of February. Back when 7-Eleven wouldn't allow you to operate their microwaves, you had to give them the product. They would put it in the microwave, and do it yourself. So I had a donut that I would get every morning, and while waiting for my donut to heat up, my water broke. Slow dribbles, but it wasn't. It wasn't a big gush like sometimes, but I did make it to work and found out that yes, my water had broke, and so that I worked on Queen Anne Hill. My hospital was in Bremerton at Bremerton. I grabbed a couple of towels and drove myself to the hospital. They induced labor on me that afternoon. By 5 o'clock, the doctor said, "Well, you're only about halfway dilated. I'm going to go home and have some dinner." 5:30, fully dilated. 5:40, 4 pushing contractions later, there she was. The nurse barely had time to put one sleeve down on her hand, walk over, and catch her. The doctor got back. I haven't delivered the placenta yet, so he got there, put one hand on my stomach, and there I delivered the placenta, and I said, "I saved something for you." Next husband. This is another story. Yeah, next husband. I got pregnant. Couldn't hide it from his mother because I found out through a pregnancy test on Christmas Eve. Didn't tell anybody. We called his mother to say Merry Christmas, and guess what? What? Barb's pregnant? Yeah, she knew. So she knew everything. But he was a diesel mechanic, and I was the gopher, and I would always be out delivering parts. That August, she was due like the end of August, and that beginning of the summer was my 10-year high school reunion. 6 of us were pregnant at the reunion. Very pregnant. A couple of us were overdue, but I wasn't due for another 3 or 4 weeks. But the next morning after the high school reunion, I started into what I thought was labor and went on all day and fine. And got tired, took a little nap, woke up, they were gone. So for 2 weeks, I had these little false contractions and labor every time I got tired. So this one Friday, they started up again. I was out delivering a transmission to my husband that he was working on a truck. Got there, he and my dad worked together, so I told my dad, I think I'm starting up again. Oh boy. Come to find out, it really was labor, and I had to decide between going to find my mother to get me to the hospital or going to get the check of the job that we just did in Renton. Yeah. Drove myself up to Renton, and I had to pull over off the freeway about 3 times because I was in the contractions and barely made it to the hospital. The whole thing was, I could title a story, "And with 10 minutes to spare." She was my Friday the 13th kid. So, more interesting stories on each one of them. But as far as due dates, they just threw them out the window. My stepson's stepdaughter was pregnant, and she was due on May 1st a year ago. She had her baby on May 1st, on her due date. Some people just get lucky. Thank you.
Barb Peterson, everyone. And just to make sure this is correct, I will actually pull this name out of the bag. Yeah, but just to make sure. Oh, no, it's you. It's Doug Avery, everyone. Round of applause. If you decide you want to tell a story, we still have time, but we're okay, right? No pressure. I can go long. Take that as, yeah, I know. Take that as a threat. All right. Okay, the time President Kennedy was shot because it happened the same day as my son was born, and I wondered how that event might change his world. Oh, a different one. The Oliver North hearings. I was living in Utah at the time, and there was a sign on a car dealership, I think, that said, Oliver North is an American hero. I don't know how that affected sales. It was Utah. It was probably fine. The Oliver North hearings, it was before the family had cable. I was homesick from school with pneumonia. What a thing to do to an elementary age student. No daytime TV. The day Trump won. Why? I can, well, never mind. Okay. I bet I know who wrote this. The death of Jerry Garcia. What more is there to say? I wasn't going to say it was you, but yeah. You didn't write that? Your mom what? Oh, is that right? Who else is a deadhead? Oh, nice. Fan of the Boys. They call them the Boys, right? Well, they used to. I was instructed by somebody who was a Grateful Dead fan that if you're in the know, you call them the Boys. And I forever thanked him because I could be an insider to fellow Grateful Dead fans. I like them. I don't. I just watched Pretty Woman again. I don't know how many of you remember the opera scene, but he said something like, some people hate it at first and they learn to appreciate it, but if you love it, it becomes part of your soul. I like the Grateful Dead. They never became part of my soul, but I can see why they have for others. So my 27 years later, 26, 25 years later, my condolences. My condolences. All right. With that, welcome Doug Avery.
So I'm going to do a little bit something different up here tonight. And I asked Steve if I could. He said I could. I know traditionally we don't do poetry up here, but I'm going to do a poem tonight. And I promise you it's still in line with the theme. I'll preface this a little bit. My first real taste of home hit news, even though I didn't know the person, when I was entering freshman year of high school, these two kids were struck and killed in a crosswalk by a drunk driver. They were entering their junior year of the school that I was attending. They were very well loved by everybody. It was a big thing. Their parents did a little poetry kind of not contest, but memorial for them because their daughter really loved poetry. And at the time I was writing poetry, and I had, even without knowing them, I had written one, in regards to what had happened, and it had made the front page of the school paper. So, and that's kind of when my real love for poetry started to develop. I haven't done it in a long time. Actually, I used to do performance poetry. I haven't done that in about 12 years. And I thought tonight might be one of those nights to do it, because over the last 4 years or so, I've been kind of slowly writing this poem. Every time something hits the headlines that, kind of brings me dread, I add a little more to it. I moved out here from Connecticut the year of the Sandy Hook massacre. And now I lost a daughter when she was 2 years old, but it was due to a failed heart transplant. I know what that felt like, and I can imagine what it feels like to lose a child the way that we've been losing them lately. And I try not to put I don't get into a lot of conversations where I put my opinion down or where I lie politically down. There are a couple of things that I firmly believe, and that is we absolutely need to find a safer way for our kids to grow up. So this is kind of I respectively call it headline hodgepodge because that's what it was. And that's the inspiration for this poem has been drawn. We're talking Floyd, school shootings, the massacre at the church, a little bit of the Me Too movement, like all these little things that bring me. I mean, I had kids. I found out my daughter a couple weeks ago took an Uber home from school with her friend by themselves. They're 14 years old. The next day, I heard about the shooting in Texas. Yeah, so things like this really hit hard for me. So I'm going to perform this poem that I've only ever performed half of once in a bar for 2 people. So forgive me because I'm going to try to do it off the top of my head. But so here we go. We got the masses slaughtering masses en masse. At a mosque, at a mass, and even during class, and I hate to sound crass, this too shall pass. Maybe not, if our current path should last. Now perhaps we've learned enough from our past to teach the future that it's not okay to harass. I pray my daughter never has anybody accidentally touch her ass. Yourself this question. When a chest presents for pinning, are we offensively offending or defensively sinning? Everybody wants to play the game that they don't want to be winning. Hell, even the Cheshire cat isn't grinning. Now you can lay a body flat, but the world will keep spinning. There are things not okay. There are things that should be. It's never too late for you and for me. And our children, they have a real chance to set it all free. If we teach them not to hate, but to love and see that we are the world and the world is we. Could show them that if maybe the violence would cease, then maybe, just maybe, we can know some peace. They say we borrow from this earth as if we're on a lease, but can you renew faith if you're holding the leash? Now who knows what'll happen when we're all deceased, but right now it's like we're all diseased, trying to appease the appeased, and it comes down to greed when they want to be pleased. Give me all of your will, I'll give you what you need. Excuse me, I just sneezed. Now tell me, who's going to bless me if in your particular God I do not believe? Still, who am I to judge you for your beliefs? On your knees you stand for something at least. The same goes for knock knock, who's there? Police protest peacefully. But it's brutally plain to see how easily rights are violated with just one knee, one plea. Your speech is free up until you can't breathe, so who speaks for you when you're under 6 feet? Protests, riots, if we stay quiet, where's the real forgery? Our rights, our religion, we're always fighting over something. It's Hillary, Hollywood, Donald Trump, and controls of guns, and she can't marry her, but he can marry his cousin? That's an exaggeration. Maybe it wasn't. How do you know what does and doesn't in a world that's twisted, full of contortion, pro-death penalty, against abortion? How do you cross lines that breed such distortion? Remember the 99 and the one with the fortune? Working 40 hours a week just to get a little portion. The other has a garage they can park the portion. But then a pandemic came and told us all to force in, and we found out real quick who was essential to steer the course in. A consortium of experts divided us with an assortment of it's not, but it's definitely, but it's not, but it is, blown out of proportion. Behind the mask, we're all sorry. Behind the mask, we're all equally vulnerable to the worst end. To err is to human, that's the nature of an earthling. Still, terror finds us all because we shoot first and ask no questions like life isn't worth it. And I wonder, how many bodies do we put in the hearse, and how long do we put up with all of this hurting before we realize, despite our differences, we're all still a person? Now you can stand upon a soapbox while a social media cage is lurking behind you like Cyrus the virus just smirking, when the real heir to the con is the government jerking us so hard there's a tax on Jergens. They say think outside the box if your ideas aren't working. Well, we need to smash that box because one thing's for certain. If we don't come together, that's it. Show's over. Draw curtains. We have the masses slaughtering masses en masse.
Round of snaps for Doug. Okay, applaud now, too. Not that you have to do what I say, but that was very powerful. When we were doing stuff online, when we couldn't gather, was part of the poem you read, or that you did that night this? Yeah, so we had a powerful night of poetry that night. And it's recorded, I'll have to check, but you might be able to find it on storynight.org, and if not, I'll download it and we'll post that video. Because Doug wasn't the only one sharing poetry that night. But again, a round of applause for Doug. Absolutely. That takes a skill I haven't mastered and never will. Well, I say I never will. Yeah, maybe I meant. All right. I don't want to say it's a gift because you work at it. You know, it's something you work at, and so great job. You know, it shows an ability to see the world and to take it in and to process it and to then communicate what you've processed, and that's really cool. Okay, over the course of your life, what news event stands out the most and why? All of the Desert Shield campaign. I was 9 when it began and had just started getting a tiny taste of the world. I was fascinated and intrigued at the amount of time the news was on in my house. My parents never watched that much news. Then bombs went off during a live broadcast. I had so many questions to which my parents had very little answers. It was my first real feeling of dread. All right. I was supposed to go shopping with a friend early one morning. She called and said, "Have you seen the news?" I turned on my television and watched in horror as a plane flew into the World Trade Center. I called my cousin and my uncle because I knew my cousin's husband was a firefighter in Manhattan. I keep calling and finally reach them, but they quickly hang up because they were trying to reach my cousin's husband. They never did. He wasn't supposed to work that day. It was their anniversary. Okay, I'm going to save that one. It's long, but it looks like it might be a good one to save. Y2K. Oh, yes, Y2K. That's pretty much the first line. The world was going to end at 010100, and my mother stockpiled canned goods, jugs of water, and gold. Only thing that happened on 010100, New Year's Day, was the start of having canned beans with every meal. Electing our first black president, and also my favorite. I thought we finally were losing bigotry. So, you know, growing up white, as I did, and becoming an adult, I never had any doubt that America would one day elect somebody who was black or of color or any other way, and I just took it for granted. And one night, the night he was elected, I was covering the news, and I was late to the Democrats were having their county party in Silverdale at that beach hotel. And I got there a little late. On the way there, they officially announced that he had been elected. And I had been speaking to people of color before the election. But when I walked in the room, the first two people I saw were two women of color, two black women. And it suddenly dawned on me that I always knew I always took it for granted that we would elect a black person, but they didn't. They thought it would never happen. So, all right. The Challenger disaster. It happened on my birthday. That was the one I was going to bring up. I was in college, got up late, missed a couple of classes, turned on the stereo, and somebody said something about, we'll keep you posted on this major development. I'm like, uh-oh, I missed something. And we couldn't see anything else for days and days. That was probably the first, because I wasn't cognizant of JFK. I was just like 6 when RFK was shot. And I remember that because we prayed in class that he would survive. The hostage thing, somehow the suddenness of that event really got to me, and it took 20-some years. Okay. And I swore, I remember my friend teased me because this is terrible. I'm going to reveal something about me. But later that day, I was like, I hope I don't hear any jokes about this, because, it's what we do. We tell jokes. And eventually, and then, several weeks later, I told one, and he reminded me that I had said that. Okay. So I saw the word Australian in here, and I had to check back to make sure it wasn't the news item I thought it was. You might have been at the Sun when it happened, when they did a story about a Bremerton-based ship that had been over launching bombs and had been out to sea for quite a while when they docked in Australia. Do you remember this? Well, it was quite a headache for the editor at the time because the sailors had been at sea for a while and they found things to engage in. And the reporter, so much so that this house where they were engaging in these fun activities had to shut down for a day because the employees needed a rest. If you have any doubts what I'm talking about, ask me afterwards. I'm not going to go on video talking more about this. This happened right before I got a job here, and at this story. And I can assure you, people were not. What year? That was 2002. And I can assure you, there were several people in the community who were less than pleased that that story ran in our paper. Okay. I'm sorry. Anyway. It's not that story. So I've just always loved this one from an old syndicated column called News of the Weird. Do y'all remember that column? A state trooper in the Australian outback saw an old Aboriginal man sitting in the middle of the highway. The old man was waiting to die in what he believed was his right time and place. The trooper attempted to move him off the highway, but the old man's relatives, waiting nearby, hit the trooper over the head with a frozen kangaroo tail they were thawing for the funeral feast. After being unconscious for hours, the trooper awoke to find himself alone. He drove back to his HQ for backup. The troopers found the site of the feast, but no people, dead or alive. They looked for the weapon used in the assault, but it had apparently been cooked and eaten. Thank you for all your contributions tonight. Give yourselves a round of applause. When I was a young teen, I went to a funeral for a little girl who lived 364 days. Her parents had moved into this church family that I belonged to and had lit up this family, this congregation. She was bubbly as heck. He was a little stoic and, reserved. But we just loved them. They had both been married before and had both had bad results from their earlier marriages. And so we all were kind of happy for them that they found each other. They found that they could bond with each other and take the kids that they had and start a new family. And so shortly after the mother gave birth to Julie, they learned very quickly that Julie was sick. Now, I don't remember what the illness was, but the doctors also said she is not going to live long. And so for this entire year, this church family just rallied around this real family. this family that was going through so much, and this congregation bonded over service that we were doing for this family. And so when the funeral came, which we all knew was going to happen, sure, there was grief, but there was also this recognition of how much love we had experienced over the past year. And even though I was a teenager, mostly concerned with other things, I got it. I got how deep that connection was. And years later, I was reminded of this. Our family went swimming at a pool at an apartment complex. And I couldn't swim that day. I just had surgery on something. And I said something, so I might as well just go to detail because I only had surgery there. It was on my butt. So it's a detail that doesn't matter, but I felt like I had to tell you. I couldn't swim that day, and I love swimming, so I was, somewhat disappointed, but glad the kids could go, and Diana went with them, went swimming with them. And we had I got to get the years right, 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And the 11 and 9-year-old were pretty reserved, and they could be trusted mostly. You just keep an eye on them, they're going to be fine. The 2-year-old, you could not take your eyes off him. He ran. If he was outside of the pool, he ran. If he was inside the pool, you just had to watch him to make sure everything was going to be safe. Well, at some point, Diana decided she was going to get ready to go. And so she got out of the pool, and I was watching the kids a little closer. And there was this utility ball. It's this kind that you buy at a Walmart or something like that, where it's rubber. It doesn't fly well, but it's fun. You can play with it, whatever. It'll float in the pool. And I was standing at the deep end of the pool, and I hit this ball, and it gave the most beautiful flight I had ever seen in my life. It wasn't like I was admiring it, but I kept my eye on it. And when it came down and landed in the water, I looked off, and my little 2-year-old, the top of his head was 6 inches below the water. And so I jumped into the pool. And I thought of 3 things. One was, is he going to need CPR? 2, do I know how to give CPR? And 3, I was reminded of this funeral that I had gone to all those years ago when I was a teenager, because the story doesn't end there. Shortly after the funeral for Julie, they announced that they were pregnant again. And they gave birth to a little girl named Lori. And shortly after Lori was born, they were told, Lori is not well. She could pull through this, is what they told them. And so once again, this church family that had rallied before, rallied again for this family, and we were in service all the time, and just amazing amounts of love, like I've probably never experienced. And about the time that Lori turned 2, the doctors gave her a clean bill of health. She was ready to live a full life. And then 3 or 4 months later, she walked out the back door of their house, through a gate, fell into the swimming pool, and drowned. That funeral was not like the first one. This church family was crushed. Just devastated. And we did our best. We put on great faces, but it was so hard. It was so much harder. And where we knew the outcome the first time and we had our grief, this time we had every reason to believe we would never be there again for that family having a funeral for one of their children. There was a psychotherapist at the time, or some psychology expert, who said that 70% of families who lose a child end up divorcing. The parents end up divorcing. That number turned out to be really high. It was a way overestimate. But that family did not survive. They moved to, their marriage didn't survive. The parents divorced a few years later, and I don't know how much was directly related to what happened with their kids, but who can doubt that that had some impact? And so this is going on in my head as I'm swimming. The swim was probably only 3 or 4 seconds for me to get to my boy. But your mind moves quickly. You have a lot to think about in those 3 or 4 seconds. And I got to him, and I lifted him up, and his hair was over his eyes, and he was breathing. And huge sigh of relief. And then I handed him to Diana, and he said, "Scary." I'm like, "Kid, you have no idea." That's it. All right. So we're at 8:30. That's actually a pretty good time to end the story night. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we'll be back next month. I believe, again, the date is July 7th. The theme is travels. Think about the road trips you've taken. July is a good month to talk about those things. Again, one more round of applause for Anna and Lindsay. Storytellers, be sure to grab a book, right? Anything else you want me to say? Okay. And applause for all of you, and thank you. We look forward to hearing your story.